It's time to learn from the best game devs. Tony Chan here, and welcome to episode 89 of Game Dev Loadout, where I chat with inspiring professionals every Wednesday morning to bring you the motivation and tactics for a successful gaming career. Now let's chat with today's featured guest, Cliff Harris. Cliff, it is game time. Are you ready?
I think I'm ready. Yep.
You will be. He is an indie game developer from the UK behind strategy and sim games such as Democracy and Gratuitous Space Battles. Now, that's quite a name right there. His company also published games such as Big Pharma. Am I pronouncing that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Big Pharma and Political Animals. And Cliff is also a big blogger writing about game development and his thoughts on the game industry. So go ahead, Cliff, give us a bit about your personal life and how you got started in the game industry.
Oh, wow. That's, well, it's a bit weird, really. I started programming as a kid when I was 11 on a tiny little home computer. And then I kind of got out of computers, and I had all sorts of weird careers working on the stock market and in IT and boat building and playing the guitar.
Well, all over the place.
yeah, exactly. I've done loads of things. And then when I was working in IT, I got back into video games and started wondering how they were made. And I'm kind of self-taught, so I taught myself C++ from like a sort of home study course on floppy disks, and then just started making games on my own. I mean, that was 20 years ago this year, so it was before indie games were really a thing. And then at some point I ended up in the proper games industry. I worked at Elixir Studios, then I worked at Lionhead for 3 years, and then I quit that, and I've been like full-time indie ever since.
A real quick question: boat building? How does that come about? I'm just really curious.
I know, it's weird, isn't it? I think I'm the only person that's gone from like wooden boat building to like computer programming. I sat next to a guy when I was in college who had a part-time job in a boatyard, and I ended up working there part-time for money while I was at college, and then I just kept doing it. I was there 8 years in total. I don't know why.
That's awesome.
It was unbelievably hard work, like crushingly hard work, but it was just like my first job, so I didn't know any different. Yeah,
it's something that fund your college, right? So it's a job, so it pays. What I guess what was that push that made you finally join the game industry from IT to the game industry?
It was, I don't know. I mean, like I'd always played video games. Like when I was a kid, we had like my first home console was Pong. When there was a home console version of Pong, which nobody remembers, but like I had that. So I was always into games, and I'd always tried to get into programming because I'd done it as a kid. But at that time in the UK, you couldn't get a job as a programmer unless you had like a formal qualification as a programmer, or you already had a job as a programmer. So that's how I ended up in IT and doing like IT support in like financial companies and stuff like that. So that was a bit of a detour, really. I'd always wanted to program video games like a lot of people do and did. So I ended up doing it, I guess, because it became possible that with the internet, that you could program games like from home on your own. And it was a hobby, really. It was a hobby that turned into a career and a proper business.
So to this day, what do you consider your main area of expertise?
I'm probably kind of an AI programmer more than anything else. That's what I did a bit of everything when I was in the main industry. When I was at Lionhead, I did a lot of AI, and I did a lot of AI at Elixir. But I did a bit of everything because I tended to be on projects that would start quite small, so you had to do whatever there was. I did tools programming, I did AI stuff, I did the occasional bit of graphics and animation stuff, sound engine stuff. So I kind of do a bit of everything. I guess I'm good at optimization of code, and from a like non-programming point of view, I know a fair bit about advertising and the business side. compared to a lot of indies who don't pay any attention to that. That's what people ask me about.
Yeah.
They ask me about marketing, which is funny because I'm basically a programmer, really, but people ask me about marketing.
I actually want to touch upon the AI part, and we don't really usually talk about creating AI and stuff like that. Can you like dive deeper into that? What is something we probably don't know about when creating an AI mechanic or AI strategy, or within your game that we should know?
Well, AI is such a vast topic. The companies that I work for, the big companies, were very heavy on the whole artificial intelligence thing, and my first proper job in the industry, which was for Elixir, pretty much all of the people there, all the top people, and my boss and everything like that, they went on to found DeepMind, the company that did AlphaGo. So obviously, they were all really into kind of very experimental, high-end sort of machine learning and stuff like that. I guess the thing that people don't realize about AI is it's very easy to make something seem alive with a few lines of code. You can program behavior that looks very natural. And I have 2 cats, and they're really very predictable. And sometimes, the way my cats behave, I think, you're only a few thousand lines of C++ at most, behavior seems complicated sometimes, but actually when you break it down, it's not that difficult to program, NPCs in games that behave and especially move in quite a natural feeling way. People think it's a lot harder than it is, to be honest.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I thought creating AI, or maybe creating a good AI would be hard, or would you consider that as simple as well?
Well, it's funny because some stuff that you think is easy is almost impossible. So, finding your way out of a maze, we're pretty good at that, and computers are rubbish at it. So the whole pathfinding, getting from A to B without going down the wrong route, is very, very hard to program. And I do a hell of a lot of that in my current game, which has a lot of a huge amount of objects finding paths from A to B, and that's very computer intensive. But if you want to program, especially if it was with text, if you wanted to program an NPC that seemed to converse with you in a way that doesn't seem too scripted, that's not too hard. The reason people tend to encounter AI in games that and NPCs in games that seem a bit rubbish is there's an obsession with having voice acting for everything. So it's easy to program an NPC that can talk to you on 100 different topics with thousands of different variants and sound fluid and responsive to you. But then if you have to record 100,000 lines of dialogue and you've got some big name actor, then you can't afford it. So that's actually the bottleneck.
I see what you mean.
It's the voice stuff. Well, the other bottleneck actually is translation. So, as an AI coder, I worked on some stuff on the movies for Lionhead, which I don't think ended up in the game, where we would generate reviews of your movies that would be written in the style of someone who would review. And it was very easy to do, and it was very interesting and fun, and we had a writer that would come up with loads of stuff, and we'd do all this sort of language stuff. But the trouble is, the minute you translate it into German, it's absolute chaos because the sentence structure is different, and obviously you have to pay to translate all of this text into German. And if you've got 20 languages and the turns of phrase are different in every language, suddenly that's what becomes expensive and difficult. But the actual programming bit of it is fairly easy and fairly fun.
Would you suggest any developer to stick to, just the dialogue? Don't put any voice or audio into it, because it might ruin the experience. Would you suggest that on for any first game, I guess, or a second game or something like that? Just avoid the audio. Just stick to text dialogue. From a purely business point of view, you have to remember that if you want to capture the whole audience, you probably and you have a successful indie game, you're probably going to want it in 10 languages or something. So
and to get it professionally done is probably like 10 cents a word. So it's probably $1 a word that you type. So every time you type a sort of one line of dialogue, it's going to cost you like sort of $50 or something. Now, if you want to record the audio, and then you want that in 10 languages, then it's going to cost you even more. And does it really add to the experience? I'm not sure it does. Really that it does. I remember playing some big famous game whose name escapes me now, and Patrick Stewart was the voice of one of the characters, and I just found it off-putting because it was like, this is Jean-Luc Picard in this game pretending to be a king, and he's just doing it for the money, and it didn't sound like he was putting much effort in. And and the other thing is, like, I am very impatient, and I value my time a lot, and I'd rather read the dialogue personally than hear it. But I don't know, people expect voice acting now, I guess, but I still have put hardly any of it in my game. I think that money is better spent on other areas of your game to make the game better than voice acting. It depends how much, what your budget is, and how much sort of language is in the game, I guess.
Overall, is there like a criteria or principles that you follow in creating an AI or NPC or some kind of mechanic?
Well, there was there's, to me, the like biggest breakthrough in like video game AI came with The Sims, and The Sims did this amazing thing in that they kind of inverted the way AI was written. So, like, prior to that, you would try and like write some character. So you would code this AI entity, and he would have all this code in him that said, you can go here, you can do that, you'll respond to this, and it will get very complicated. And what The Sims did is they didn't do any of that. They put all of the they did a bit of that, but they put a lot of the AI in the objects. So, like, if your sim bought a radio, the radio would contain like animations for like dancing to music and things that the sim would say, and all this kind of data and kind of code and logic would be in the object. So you had fairly simplistic entities that would react to the world around them. And the great thing was then that when they did expansion packs and stuff, suddenly your sims can do other things and behave in different ways that they never even coded, because they stick the code in the object, which is brilliant. I love that. I thought that's amazing. I've stolen that for various games I've worked on and put that in, because it's such a clever way of doing it, and it makes the code for the actual character less like spaghetti, because AI code, when you look at it, is very messy. So I thought that was a brilliant way of doing things.
So using the environment, you're saying like it's probably easier than trying to make the entity themselves like a big AI or a big, mechanic to the game.
Yeah, because you're kind of distributing the logic of stuff throughout the world, which makes a lot more sense once you're used to working that way than trying to code some like AI entity that knows about everything that could be in the world. It's also great for modding, of course, because if you can have a scripting language in your game, then people can mod their own behaviors for characters that already exist in the game, which is fantastic. I mean, generally speaking, AI in games is not very good. Unless it's a big feature, like if you play the big name games, especially these like MMOs where you go up to some NPC and they're almost like tape recorders that just play back their one line of backstory. Yeah. It's just awful. I mean, like, as someone who used to code like entity AI, when I play games like that, I think this is awful, and the guy just stands there. They're not even playing an animation or doing anything. There's no attempt to make it seem lifelike. It's so disappointing. When games exist like Dwarf Fortress that have like awful graphics, obviously, but unbelievable complexity of sort of backstory and stuff like that. It can be done. It's just not done for all sorts of kind of, server latency and tedious business issues, I guess.
Wow, that's really interesting. The way how simulation games like The Sims, the way you say they use the environments. No, yeah, that's another way game devs should think about their games from now on too. Yeah, I'm just thinking about it in my head right now. It's really interesting. But yeah, let's go ahead. Let's take this on a more personal level. You've been working on games for years now. I want to talk about the worst moment of your career. That one moment that's still vivid in your mind. Be very detailed and tell us that personal story that you have to overcome.
Oh. Dear.
Come on, give it to us. Let us know.
There's a few. I've left a games company in a very heated argument, which is funny because I recently bumped into the guy who I had that argument with at a show, and he's fine and I'm fine, and like we get along, and like it was just really stressful. I guess that's one of them. I've had bugs that are really bad. I had a bug that was very bad, that was potentially like destroy someone's computer bad. And someone reported a problem to me, and I thought, no, I'm sure this isn't a bug of mine. And I looked into it, and then I managed through a lot of experimentation to get this bug to trigger on my PC, and all kinds of things went wrong. And I thought, oh my God, I cannot believe I have made this mistake. And yeah, I remember frantically coding this patch for it and putting it out immediately, and no one else got affected by it. But I was really worried. It was a very rare circumstance of stuff but it would delete stuff on your hard drive.
Oh wow!
Which is all. It didn't happen to anyone, but like, although it started happening to me, but you know, if you've got loads of like antivirus stuff, it will suddenly flag up going, "Hey, what are you doing?" But I was terrified that may trigger. It's actually really easy to do. A similar thing happened with EVE Online. In fact, theirs was even worse because theirs actually rendered your PC unbootable. This is the problem. Like with C++ and Windows, it is scarily possible to do really bad things if you screw up. And luckily that hardly ever happens. But that's the worst bug I've had, and it only really impacted me, but I was really worried.
Yeah, I like the way you emphasize it was really bad.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you know, that's a reputation destroying bug to have. And now that bit of code, it was code to do with deleting a file where the player goes to delete some content intentionally, and under certain circumstances, the file name that would be passed in would be empty. And given the structure of that code, it would then start to delete everything. which is bad. But now, like, and after I learned from that, and I worked out what the bug was, and it was quite simple. But then I put loads of checks in all of any area of my game that can ever delete a file. There's all these checks that like it's only deleting a file in a certain location, it's only deleting one file. It's, you know, there's so much code wrapped around that to ensure I never can ever get into that position again, because that was bad.
Oh yeah, fortunately, yeah, it didn't affect anybody else. But of course, I can't just pass over the first story that you just told us that you had like an argument or something. Like, of course you can't go, I don't want you to go into details, but like, how did you handle the situation, or what was the outcome, and, you know, and so forth?
Oh, yeah, no, I handled it badly. And, well, everyone handled it badly, to be honest. I mean, I've been in this company too long, and I was very frustrated there. And kind of sort of wanted to leave, I guess, but had stayed on the assumption that things would change. And yeah, I just lost it. I got into a very strong argument with someone there and stormed off. And anyway, that was it. That's how I left.
Oh, what? Oh, you just up and left?
Yeah, well, yeah, and not quite. There was a lot of discussion over how to handle it. But, like, yeah, I mean, to be honest, looking back on it, like, I just stayed in that company too long. I'm very indie. I don't like working for other people, and I'm not very easy to employ because I'm quite outspoken and maybe not massively respectful of authority either. so it was kind of a bad fit. To be honest, I have stormed out of another job as well.
2 times?
Not a games job. Not a game shop. I'm wondering if there's a third. I'm just thinking. I don't think so. But yeah, I'm not a good employee. That's what it comes down to. I am much better working for myself. Much happier working for myself.
So from that experience, what do you want to make sure game devs take away from that? Because we hear that, although the game industry is huge, it's still small in the sense that, like you just said earlier, you bumped into that person recently. And so what should we take away from that experience?
Well, the thing is, I used to be. This sounds like a diversion, but like I used to play guitar. I used to teach guitar, and I used to do some session guitar stuff and be in bands. And the games industry is a lot like the music industry. In that it is a big industry that makes loads of money. It's similar in many ways because almost everyone in the music business makes no money, and some people just make piles of money, and that's similar to games. And there's many more people that want to be in games than the industry will support, which is a lot like music. So you end up with a lot of kind of very stressed people who are doing what they love doing, but they're very, very passionate about it and very intensely into it, and they're working very, very, very hard. And it's basically just a recipe for everyone to get into huge fights and hate each other. Because it's like that sort of pressure cooker thing. Because it's not like a normal job. It's a bit better now, I think. But, there were a lot of companies where people would work very, very long hours and they'd work very late and they'd go beyond, what you would normally put into a job. Because it's not massively well paid at any point. So it's... You really do put a lot of pressure onto people, and I don't think it's surprising that a lot of people fall out and they get into sort of loud arguments. And also the games industry has this thing that it attracts people like me who are kind of fairly introverted, kind of quiet, not particularly people. So we don't have we have good technical skills and not very good people skills. So, like you put all that together, it's going to be really tough. It is a very, very tough industry, and it is very tough to make it through. But I think I don't think people hold grudges. I've had huge arguments with people, some famous people, some not, and always ended up it's been fine and getting along with them, because ultimately very few people are in the industry for the money, because there isn't much. So generally you realize that everyone is in there just to try and make cool games and work on great stuff. So like everyone's got a lot in common, however much we might kind of all get on each other's nerves.
Yeah, so just try, I guess, game does work on your interpersonal skills. And
yeah. Well, you forget you spend a year. I mean, when I'm going to GDC soon, and you go to GDC and there's all these people who have spent 99% of the year on their own, sat in a room with a keyboard, and then suddenly they're all at a party, and it's just really weird that nobody knows how to behave because it can be quite intimidating for a lot of people, that if you're not a massively sociable, gregarious kind of person, and there's a lot of people like that in the industry, then the whole networking and meeting people stuff is actually very hard. I find it quite hard, but I force myself to do it anyway. But it can be pretty tough in that respect.
They definitely work on interpersonal skills. Yeah, if you're working on team, you're going to have those type of skills. But yeah, what are bad recommendations do you hear in your profession?
The trouble is, there's a lot of people who are. You'll get a lot of advice if you're in the industry. If you go onto Reddit and sort of say, oh, I'm thinking of making this game, or I'm thinking of, porting to this platform, you will get a massive amount of advice, and almost all of it will be rubbish. And that's because, like, the people who are always, like, on Facebook and Twitter and Reddit just sat there waiting to give advice on stuff. These are not successful people. These are the people who spend a lot of time on social media. So, and I force myself every now and then, like every 6 months or something, I think I've never gone to like the Game Dev Reddit and ever posted. I must go there and see if anyone's asking about something that I might know about. And you think, and I think how futile that is, because there are people on there all the time, and there are people online all the time who will give advice. And the best thing you can ever do, and it seems like really cruel, but you have to kind of maybe not say to someone, but at least have it in the back of your mind, thinking, well, what makes you qualified to have any opinion on this? So, for example, if you said to me, like, I'm making a mobile game, should I do this genre or that genre? I would say I have no idea, because I don't make mobile games. My general opinion is don't make a mobile game, you won't make any money. But if you've done your research and you have like some reason why you can do that, then I have no idea. If you ask whether or not you should work with Sony or Nintendo, I have no idea, because I haven't directly worked with either. But you never hear that. You never hear people in discussions, especially online, saying, to be honest, I don't know, I don't have that much experience. And I read a huge amount of stuff with people saying there's no point in advertising your indie game.
Oh, no.
I spent $100 advertising my game. It was a complete waste of time. Don't do it. And I think this will kind of sound like me bragging, but I'm not. I'm just pointing out the difference. Yeah, so Facebook ads, for example, someone might say, look, I've spent $100 on Facebook ads. I didn't notice any difference in how many downloads were on my game. It's not worth it. And what you can take from that is one person that spent $100, they did not perceive a direct difference. Now, I mean, I just happen to have the tab open. I've spent $265,000 on Facebook ads over the years. So as you can imagine, I'm pretty convinced they work, right? Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is I have a lot more data. I have, literally 1,000 times more data points on that issue. So if you see me talking about the pros and cons and the methods of like Facebook ads, I know what I'm talking about. If you hear me talking about whether Android or iPhone is a better platform, then just slap me and tell me, Cliff, you have no idea. No, you don't know anything about this because you've never made a mobile game. And I think that's the most important thing. You have to know whose advice you're taking and on what basis that is the case. Because we all have intuition about stuff in games and what should work and what shouldn't work. And often that intuition is wrong. I honestly think that free-to-play should not work, but it clearly does. I think that there's no way you could run an entire games business based on selling virtual hats. That I know that cannot possibly work, but then we know that it does. Mm-hmm. So you have to listen to specific people on specific issues. I think that would be my summary of that.
No, I like that because you want to listen to someone that has credibility, basically, someone that could back up what they're saying, and that makes perfect sense. So I completely understand that. Okay, now you're more experienced, you're more better, and definitely you got credibility. So, what do you think is one of the best investments you've ever made? It could be investment of money, time, or energy. Well, what was that investment?
Okay, I'll give you two. I'll give you one time and one money. The time thing is learning how to code my own games engine, which I did at the time. I mean, we're going back a long, long time, like before Unity, before anything. I think when I was first coding games to sell them, you could license the Unreal Engine, but it was like $1 million a game. And this was before we really had indie developers. So so things have changed a lot. So I learned how to code everything, like graphics and everything, sound input, whatever, from scratch because I had to. But I think that has been very helpful because it's very interesting. It's intellectually very interesting to learn how all that works. It also gives you a big insight into performance and why your game may be slow that you possibly are a bit insulated from if you're using someone else's engine. A lot of the time you'll realize it's just slow, but you don't really know where. And if you have the source code because you've written your own engine and you remember why you wrote everything, that's very helpful. So I get to code very fast stuff when I need it. And also I'm not reliant on anything else. I'm not paying any money to Unity. And if they update Unity or Unreal or whatever and it breaks everything, obviously I don't care because I'm not using it. So that's given me an independence that I think is very helpful. Obviously it takes a lot of time. So that's the time thing. The physical, like the money thing, which I've told a lot of people over the years, is this chair that I'm sat in. I have the absolute cliche chair that you see everywhere, which is the Herman Miller Aeron. Which is the chair that you like. If ever you see any like .com startup and you see all their coders sat in these chairs, they're all exactly the same. That's what it is. That's what. That's basically if you've got like a tech startup and you have coders and you have money, you buy these chairs for everyone. I got mine second hand. No, it wasn't second hand. It was ex-display and it was £800, which is what $1,100. Which is a huge amount of money for a chair, but I mean it's more than my first car cost. Okay, I'm fully aware that it's a crazy amount of money, but like I sit on it like at least like 10 hours a day, and they last forever. They're completely and utterly indestructible. So why would I not make that investment? I think that you don't. If you get a good office chair. A really comfortable one, like you're not going to replace it in 5-6 years. You're not, and you'll probably replace your laptop or your PC several times. So even if you just like take that calculation, your chair should cost at least as much as a new PC, because it's affecting your health, it's affecting your mood and all the rest of it. It's a really good investment, and even if you think that's kind of over the top and unnecessary, like don't buy like a $20 chair from some kind of like cheap shop and sit in that and work on that. Make some sort of investment in your comfort, because indie devs spend a lot of time sat in front of a keyboard, and it's so much better for you if you're comfortable when you do that. So yeah, code your own engine and buy a nice chair.
Yeah, code your own engine. I do honestly think that people underestimate the chair. Like it does make a huge difference in your productivity and your health as well, because the way you sit on it, the way it feels when you put your butt on it, like it does make a huge difference, because you're sitting for long hours on it.
I mean, there's a good. The thing is a little bit like advertising, right? Like loads of huge companies spend a huge amount of money on advertising, and if you're saying no, it doesn't work, then you're kind of saying that they're all wrong, and that they're probably not. And like pretty much every like tech startup that wants to keep good coders, they all buy these chairs, and they're not all wrong. There's a reason that and loads of people I know who are indies have exactly the same chair. I mean, there's a few varieties of it, but like, it takes a long time for people to learn that lesson. But now, if you put me in an ordinary office chair, I would just rebel. I'd be screaming. I'd be like, I can't sit here.
And then you run out. You get a better chair. What chair are you using? Like, what's it called and what brand is it?
It's the Aeron, Aeron. I bet you if you search for like .com chair, I bet you it is. I'm just going to do that because I'm pretty. Yeah, it's the top entry, the Aeron chair, Wikipedia. Yeah, like everyone knows about it. It's they're expensive, but they're good.
I definitely will link that up. So yeah, Game does get a great chair. What was the greatest idea you had today, like an aha moment?
Well, I did this politics game called Democracy, and then I did Democracy 2, Democracy 3. And they're my best-selling games by far. Very successful. They're used in schools and stuff like that to teach economics and politics. And the idea for that came in a very weird way. I was reading a book called Growing Up with Lucy, which is written by a guy called Steve Grand, who was a British guy who started a computer games company called Creature Labs. He made this video game called Creatures a long time ago, which was had really good AI in it. And then after that, he started trying to create a artificially intelligent chimpanzee, as you do. And he wrote a book, and I thought that sounds interesting. I saw a bit of a documentary on him, and he wrote a book about it. And I was reading this book, and it described how neural networks work, which is kind of how the human brain works, and it's something that is sometimes used in computer science. It's used a lot more now, but was a little bit obscure back then. And I was reading about this thinking this is very interesting. And then I had this weird like aha thing where I thought you could use this piece of AI, this way of structuring code to represent politics and economics and political policies impacts on people's opinions. And like I don't know where that came from.
Whoa.
I was kind of into politics. I studied politics at college, and so I was interested in that area. And I thought, this is exactly like people are affected by policies, and how one policy will affect a certain thing that will affect another thing that will affect another thing, and you get like ripple effects through society. And I thought that would be a great way to model that. And obviously, like no one had done that before. No one had written a game with that sort of code structure before, and it did really well. So that was a very weird, sudden idea, bolt out of the blue, that has basically defined my career, because that's the game that has allowed me to, or that was the big game that's allowed me to keep making games for so long, I guess.
Are you gonna do more games like that? Because are there other similar games? I don't know a lot of games that's like really political or have those, I guess, consequences or something like. Are there other games like that?
Not really. There's a game called The Political Machine by Stardock, but that's more about elections and like fighting elections, and it's US only. Whereas Democracy was about the general concept of politics. But Democracy was about governing a country and hoping you would get re-elected because the country was in a good state. And no one else has really done that. I've done like 3 variations of that game, and we did one set in Africa called Democracy 3 Africa. I then published this game by some developers in the Philippines called Political Animals, that was kind of a cross between Democracy and the Political Machine, I guess. But no, I kind of dominate that part of indie games. I think because it was a big hit. It was Democracy 3 sold hundreds of thousands of copies. I can't remember how many, but loads. So it's quite tough to compete with that because it has loads of expansions. There's hundreds of mods for it and things like that. So no, there's really no competition, and we are going to do another one soon that will have a much nicer user interface and be much more up to date. Because obviously politics has changed now. We have fake news and social media and stuff like that. So there's a lot we can update in it, and we will be doing that soon.
I'm surprised, or I'm not necessarily not surprised, but I think it's awesome that there's a market out for that, for those type of games.
Well, yeah, there is, and it's mine. But it seems like if you went to pitch it to a publisher, if you said, "Oh, I want to do a game about political policies and interest rates, and they'd say, no, that's rubbish. No one wants to do that. But having done it, I realized what we kind of did is it's a game that allows the sort of people that want to argue about politics on the internet to kind of argue with themselves and see if they're right, which is obviously like going to be really popular because people who are really into politics, they like to like be proven right. So they like this kind of little sandbox that they can play in and see how things go. So having made it, it seems sensible that it was popular, but it didn't look like it would be when I first had the idea.
Was there any like major implications when you created a game? Like, I of course I haven't played your game, but it's like, did you like reference anything in the real world?
Well, it's interesting because as far as I know, it's the only kind of, apart from maybe the political machine, it's kind of the only politics game that isn't trying to make a political point. Oh. So I was just trying to make a game that was kind of like, this is a simulation of modern politics and economics, and you can play with it. That was kind of my idea. So I didn't go into it with any particular kind of notion of trying to make a point. But I did find, because obviously I've played it a ridiculous amount, that what it teaches you is compromise and to kind of change society before you change politics. So, and it's kind of a lesson that you can see in history. So, if you're too far to the extremes, you lose the game, and it's not designed that way. It's just the way it happens. But if you can like put in place fairly subtle, fairly kind of like long-term policies that change society over like a generation towards your point of view, regardless whether it's liberal or conservative or capitalist or socialist or whatever, you then find that everything just moves along fine and you can keep getting re-elected. But when you have a very extremist view, it all goes wrong really quickly and everything just falls apart. So I guess what it's done is prove that, like, as they say, politics is the art of the possible. And you have to kind of rein in your own instincts to just change everything really quickly. But video gamers, when they first play it, a lot of the time they immediately go and they legalize like LSD, and they give all the police machine guns, and then they like quadruple the minimum wage, and everything's wrong, you know. And you think, well, obvious, and then they get assassinated or voted out, and they say,
you could get assassinated.
Yeah, you can get a lot of people get assassinated playing it. Yeah, but I think, and they say this is ridiculous. Like, the US president never gets assassinated, even though like they succeeded once and tried another time. So, and it's like, yeah, the US president doesn't get assassinated often, but he doesn't do the kind of, or she doesn't do the kind of crazy stuff that you tried to do in the first month. You know, you generally have to kind of like go with the flow of how society changes. I mean, that all may be changing with, you know, Trump.
Yeah.
But,
wow. Very awesome concept, man. I really love the concept. Now I really hope to see more games like it. And yeah, you're making another one, so that is awesome right there.
Cool. Yeah, I haven't started it yet. We're starting it very soon.
Nice. So, all right, before we go to the lightning round game devs, don't forget that on my website, gamedevloadout.com, I will have all the show notes for you to use that we just talked about today. Everything that Cliff mentioned, I will definitely post it up on the show notes. So just type in the number 89 in the search bar to find Cliff episodes. And now, Cliff, are you ready to crush the lightning round?
You want quick answers, do you?
Yeah, it depends on you, but yeah, preferably a quick answer.
Yeah, sure.
What was holding you back from joining the game industry?
I don't know.
That's a legit answer.
Nothing would hold me back now, but back before I joined, the industry was tiny. It was not something people did. Like, nobody knew anyone in the games industry. Now, nothing would hold me back. But back then, it was just like, That's not a real job.
Yeah. What's a personal habit that contributes to your success?
Getting out of bed early.
Oh, what time you usually wake up?
Well, now I'm really slack. But when when I was a real workaholic, I would be working at my desk by 8 o'clock, which doesn't sound that early, but for a computer programmer it is, because we'll work till like 8 o'clock in the evening. But just learning how to get out of bed and go straight to work without messing around. That's the best thing. You can Google on how to do this. There are techniques.
Yeah, because when you tackle your main priority in the morning, to me, you get it done better or faster, because you won't have, for one, you have the energy, and also it'd be less distraction as well, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
That's a good question. Somewhere I must have been given the advice to just ask for more money. I must have. Ask for more money. Most of the time you don't get it, but occasionally you do, and it's just like free money, because you think, hey, they weren't going to give me that unless I said. Ask, in any negotiation, just ask for more. It's really awkward, but do it.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I recently read an article saying that, people that want a promotion, all they have to do is just ask. Like, you never know until you ask as well. So ask for more money. What's a great marketing tip to make yourself and your game stand out? Faces.
Put faces in your game. Make sure I'm rubbish at this, because I always come up with game ideas without characters in, which is very distressing, but sometimes I shoehorn them in anyway. Read the neuroscience. There's a huge amount of your brain, a disproportionate amount of your brain is dedicated to looking for faces and looking for emotion in faces. And if you have 3 images of games and one of them has a face in that image, that is the one that everyone looks at first.
Oh, interesting. What resources should we use to get started today?
I don't know. I think if you are very, very technically minded and you want to be a programmer more than anything else, then buy some good C++ books and learn how to code everything from scratch. If you're not, then use Unity, I guess. And there's so many online, like YouTube tutorials on Unity that you should probably go that route. But don't be put off the idea of actually learning to code from the ground up. It is very valuable.
Awesome. Now, this question is pretty big. This next question right here. Imagine you woke up the next morning in a brand new world and you knew no one. You still have all the experience and knowledge you currently have today. Your food and shelter is taken care of, and you have a laptop. What would you do step by step on the path to join and become successful in the game industry?
I would make a PC strategy game and sell it on Steam. I would make it 2D top down. I would find an artist to do like revenue share on it, and I would do all my own marketing and game design and code it from scratch. You probably don't even need Unity to do that. It might even be easier. That's the safest, best route to actually making a game that will make money.
Wow, nice. Like you just went straight to it. We have reached the end. Go ahead and give us one last parting piece of guidance and how we can connect with you, and then we'll say goodbye.
Oh, right. I am known everywhere as Cliffski. I have a blog at www.cliffski.com, and I occasionally get into arguments on Twitter and as well. And the company name is positech.co.uk. We're currently doing a game about running and building a car factory called Production Line, which is in early access on Steam right now.
Awesome. The Game Does. Definitely check out his blog and his game. I will link everything up on the show notes. Cliff, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us. For that, we are truly grateful, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks.
Thank you, Game Devs, for listening. I hope we brought you value today. Equip yourself with the best loadout and take action. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast with iTunes or Castbox to listen to more inspiring stories and gain valuable knowledge. I greatly appreciate it if you share the show with your fellow peers so that they can also be motivated. Until then, I'm your host, Tony Chan, and I'll catch you next Wednesday on the Game Dev Loadout podcast. Peace.